And lastly, Michelle Obama is a man. Am I right, America?
What kind of market makes 5 false words more valuable than an entire verified human life? On the evening of June 14th, 2026, a temporary octagon stood on the south lawn of the White House. The building behind it had survived wars, assassinations, impeachment proceedings, constitutional crises, and 2 centuries of Americans projecting onto it whatever they believed the country was supposed to be. In front of that building, under broadcast lighting, Josh Hawkett stopped Derek Lewis in the second round of a heavyweight fight. Joe ROH Gunn entered the cage with a microphone. President Donald Trump sat nearby. Dana White was there. The event was being distributed through Paramount Plus and CBS. Betting information had become part of the normal visual grammar of UFC broadcasts. Crypto.com and RAM were attached to the event. Thousands of invited spectators occupied federal grounds, while a much larger audience watched through television screens, phone screens, clipped video, reposted fragments, and reaction accounts. Hawkett praised the president, spoke about religion, addressed other fighters, and then said that Michelle Obama was a man. The statement was false, but the statement was also highly engineered for the market into which it was released. I do not mean that I know he sat in a room and engineered it. I cannot know that. I mean, the statement possessed the characteristics that the surrounding distribution system rewards, whether or not the speaker had calculated them consciously. It was short enough to survive clipping. It named a globally recognizable person. It activated race, gender, partisan identity, celebrity, and conspiracy in a single line. It required no supporting evidence. It invited immediate coalition recognition. It guaranteed that supporters would circulate it as transgression, and opponents would circulate it as condemnation. And because it was spoken inside an octagon placed on the White House lawn, every repost carried 2 forms of institutional branding at once. The UFC supplied combat credibility. The White House supplied historical weight. The sentence acquired value from the very institutions it violated. That is the first mechanism I want you to see. I call it the attention option. An option is valuable because its downside can be limited while its upside remains open. The buyer pays a known premium for exposure to an uncertain future payoff. A provocative public statement can have the same shape. The production cost is close to zero. The speaker risks criticism, sponsor discomfort, disciplinary action, or reputational damage. Those costs are real. Dana White publicly rejected the comment, and that tells you the downside is not imaginary. But the upside is convex. If the statement disappears, almost nothing has been spent. If it circulates, it can produce millions of impressions, follower growth, interviews, political affinity, audience ownership, future bookings, and a durable identity that separates one athlete from dozens of technically competent athletes the public cannot name. The payoff does not rise in a straight line. It jumps when the clip crosses into national argument. That is an option. And the underlying asset is not Michelle Obama. The underlying asset is social reaction. Watch the biography, because it matters. Hawkett did not arrive at that microphone through a conventional celebrity pipeline. He walked onto the football team at Fresno State. He competed in 51 college football games. He scored 17 rushing touchdowns. He wrestled at the same university, finished with a 60-20 record, and became a 2-time All-American. He then entered the National Football League through its least secure door as an undrafted free agent. San Francisco signed him in 2020. That status is worth understanding. An undrafted free agent is inside the institution but outside its strongest commitments. Draft capital is a form of organizational sunk cost. Teams often give drafted players time because admitting failure means admitting that the selection process failed. The undrafted player has less protection. He must become useful immediately, remain useful constantly, and survive repeated comparisons against younger replacements whose presence was authorized by someone higher in the organization. Hawkett spent time around the 49ers roster and practice squad. Arizona later brought him in. By August 2022, he had been waived. He then moved toward professional fighting and made his professional MMA debut in 2023. Think about the selection environment. Walk-on, undrafted, practice squad, waived, new sport, contender series, UFC contract. None of this proves anything about his private beliefs. I want to be very careful there. A biography is not a psychological confession. Plenty of athletes pass through unstable selection systems without adopting political provocation as a public identity. But institutions select traits even when nobody announces the selection rule. In evolutionary biology, the organism does not need to understand the environment for the environment to shape which traits persist. Variation appears. The environment retains some forms and removes others. In a creator market, personas function like variations. Some disappear. Some generate clips. Some create a reliable audience response. The platform, the promoter, the fan base, and the press collectively perform the selection. A fighter who is technically excellent but socially interchangeable has one income stream. A fighter who is technically excellent and narratively volatile may have several. The UFC itself published material about Hawkett wanting to become a household name. Dana White had previously expressed reservations about his larger-than-life post-fight persona. Then, Hawkett produced a violent, memorable fight against Curtis Blades, and White's view softened. That sequence matters. Performance validated the persona. Once athletic competence and spectacle fused, the persona stopped looking like noise attached to the product. It became part of the product. This is old in combat sports. Muhammad Ali understood that the fight began before the bell. Professional wrestling built an entire industry around the conversion of character conflict into ticket demand. Boxing promoters have always known that hostility can sell a bout that technique cannot. The new element is the distribution machinery. A theatrical insult once had to sell tickets in a specific city. Now it can be clipped within seconds, detached from the original broadcast, translated into captions, inserted into political feeds, debated by people who have never watched a complete fight, and monetized by dozens of secondary accounts that had no role in producing the event. The provocative athlete no longer needs to own the whole distribution chain. He only needs to create the object that the chain cannot resist moving. This is where the adjacent streaming economy matters. Kick did not cause the White House statement. I'm not claiming a direct contract, instruction, or payment. The relation is structural. Kick and the gambling company Stake were built by the same founders. Kick entered the streaming market with a 95-5 subscription revenue split, and direct creator payments tied in part to viewership. It attracted creators who could be difficult for conventional advertisers, platforms, or talent agencies to accommodate. That produces a distinct form of creator labor. A conventional television host protects brand compatibility. The host must remain usable across sponsors, time slots, affiliates, and audience segments. The high-volatility streamer can operate differently. His economic value may come from being impossible to ignore, even when much of the audience dislikes him. You have seen the behavior this market can generate. A creator enters a grocery store. He opens merchandise he has not purchased. He provokes an employee. He adopts an accent. He says something designed to create racial discomfort. He films the worker's confusion and anger. The employee believes a social interaction is taking place. The creator knows an attention asset is being manufactured. That distinction is severe. One participant is living the event. The other participant is mining the reaction. I call this reaction extraction. The creator supplies the provocation. The unsuspecting person supplies emotional labor, facial expression, conflict, and authenticity. The platform receives retention. The audience supplies comments and reposts. A sponsor, gambling operator, or creator program can then convert the accumulated attention into money. The person who generated the most valuable part of the scene may be the only person who is not paid. Years ago, when I was a junior analyst at Salomon Brothers, I watched the Treasury auction scandal move through that firm. I was too junior to know much before it happened, and I do not want to inflate my role. I watched senior partners leave. I watched reputational value that had taken decades to accumulate disappear at a speed no balance sheet had been designed to represent. That episode taught me something I did not understand from finance textbooks. An institution owns its reputation only while other people agree not to trade against it. The moment a scandal becomes public, journalists, competitors, clients, regulators, politicians, and employees begin converting the same event into different assets. One firm's catastrophe becomes another newspaper's circulation, another prosecutor's career opportunity, another competitor's sales pitch, another politician's evidence. The event ceases to belong to the institution that produced it. The White House moment had the same property. Once the sentence entered the microphone, the UFC could condemn it, remove clips, or distance itself. The White House could refuse to engage. The speaker could defend, revise, or intensify it. None of those actors retained full control because the clip had become external inventory. The sentence was now owned by every account capable of reposting it. So I want to revise the opening question slightly. The issue is not merely why someone would say something false in a prestigious setting. The issue is why the prestigious setting increased the market value of the falsehood. A claim made in a private gym may reach 50 people. The same claim, spoken beside Joe Rogan, with the UFC logo underfoot and the White House behind the cage, arrives preloaded with social consequence. The venue supplies what finance would call collateral. The speaker temporarily borrows the institution's symbolic capital. He uses that capital to issue a private attention asset. The institution bears part of the reputational exposure. The speaker captures a large portion of the circulation. That is an asymmetric trade, and it points toward a deeper shift. We have spent years discussing misinformation as though it were defective information. Sometimes it is, but defective information can still be excellent inventory. A counterfeit painting is a failed artwork if judged by provenance. It may remain a successful fraud if judged by the amount of money it moves. A false claim can fail every epistemic test and pass every distribution test. That is why correcting the sentence, while necessary, does not explain the sentence. The correction asks whether it is true. The market asks whether it travels. Those are different pricing systems. At the White House, for several seconds, the second pricing system won. The statement did not enter public life as a carefully argued proposition. It entered as a security whose value depended on trading volume, and the country supplied the volume. Imagine a family dinner in 1996. A disagreement begins over evolution. One person at the table has a doctorate in biology from Berkeley, another drives a truck, a third is a nurse. Nobody is legally compelled to accept the biologist's argument. The biologist may be arrogant, politically biased, socially clumsy, or wrong about a specific question. But the doctorate carries a recognized inference. It tells the table that this person survived years of coursework, examinations, laboratory work, criticism, failed hypotheses, and evaluation by people who already knew the field. The credential does not prove every sentence. It raises the cost of pretending to know the subject. Michael Spence's signaling model is useful here. In the original labor market formulation, education can communicate worker quality partly because obtaining the signal is more costly for some types than for others. The signal works when it is difficult to imitate cheaply. Expert authority once depended heavily on signals of this kind. Degrees, institutional positions, peer review, professional licensing, years inside a practice. Again, those systems were never pure. They excluded capable people. They preserved class advantage. They sometimes rewarded obedience rather than insight. Universities can protect fashionable errors. Professional associations can become clubs. Credentialed experts can coordinate around a mistake and defend it longer than outsiders expect. The old order was flawed, but it imposed friction. To become legible as an authority, you usually had to spend time inside a verification process whose costs were not reducible to audience applause. Social media introduced a second authority regime. In this regime, the signal is visible circulation. Follower count is public. Views are public. Comments are public. The speed of response is public. The audience does not observe the year spent learning. It observes the number beside the post. That creates two separate ledgers. The first is the knowledge ledger. It records training, accuracy, disciplinary competence, prediction, and the willingness to survive correction. The second is the attention ledger. It records reach, repetition, emotional activation, coalition loyalty, and the ability to remain visible. A person can be rich in one ledger and insolvent in the other. The destabilizing change is that the attention ledger is immediately observable while the knowledge ledger is expensive to inspect. You can see 10 million views in 1 second. You may need 10 years of education to evaluate the claim those views contain. That mismatch creates what I call liquidity solvency confusion. In banking, liquidity and solvency are different. A solvent institution owns assets worth more than its liabilities but may lack cash today. An insolvent institution may appear liquid for a period if funding continues to arrive. Online, a claim with enormous circulation can appear intellectually solvent because it is socially liquid. People see movement and infer value. Repetition becomes a substitute for verification. The claim is everywhere, so the audience assumes there must be something underneath it. Sometimes there is. Often the movement is the entire asset. The empirical evidence is uncomfortable. Jonah Berger and Catherine Milkman studied why online content travels and found that high arousal emotions, including anger and anxiety, increase sharing. The point was not that negative content always wins. Sadness can reduce transmission. Arousal is the more useful variable. The nervous system is activated, and activated people transmit. William Brady and his co-authors examined more than 563,000 messages concerning polarizing political subjects. They estimated that each additional moral emotional word increased diffusion by about 20%. Pause on that. The result does not say that every moral word guarantees virality. It does not give us a deterministic machine. But it tells us that language carrying moral judgment and emotional force has measurable transmission value. Steve Rathje, J. Van Bavel, and Sander van der Linden later analyzed roughly 2,730,000 posts from news organizations and members of Congress. References to a political outgroup were associated with much greater sharing. Each outgroup term increased the odds of sharing by an estimated 67%. Outgroup language was a much stronger predictor of engagement than ordinary negative language, or moral emotional language by itself. The strongest object in the post was the enemy. That finding matters because the Michelle Obama statement was not merely a claim about an individual. It compressed an entire outgroup architecture into a name. Obama, former Democratic First Lady, black woman, elite education, Chicago, Harvard Law, the first black presidential family, gender conflict, transgender panic. For the relevant audience, the name already carried a network of political associations. Hawkett did not need to describe the network. He activated it. The sentence functioned like a ticker symbol. A ticker does not contain the company. It points toward the company and allows the market to trade the accumulated meaning. The name Michelle Obama pointed toward a decade and a half of racial, partisan, gendered, and conspiratorial memory. The 5-word claim converted that memory into an executable social command. Share if you agree. Share if you are outraged. Share if you want to mock the speaker. Share if you want to defend the target. Share if you want to prove what the country has become. The distribution system is indifferent to why the packet moved. This is where the analogy to market microstructure becomes useful. In modern equity markets, order flow is not homogeneous. A market maker wants to know whether the person on the other side is informed. Retail orders are valuable partly because they are often less informed and therefore less dangerous to fill. Wholesalers can internalize that flow, offer small price improvement, and capture part of the spread. The public exchange may receive a more toxic residual, meaning orders more likely to contain information adverse to whoever fills them. The platform also classifies flow, though its objective is different. A calm correction may be high-quality information but low reactivity inventory. An inflammatory accusation may be low-quality information but high reactivity inventory. If ranking systems optimize predicted engagement, the second object can receive superior distribution even when users later report that it made their experience worse. The system is not consciously deciding that falsehood is noble. It is estimating which object will prevent departure, trigger response, or increase session time. The ranking model performs its assigned task. The assignment may be the problem. Smith-Emily and her co-authors audited engagement-based ranking and found that it could amplify emotionally charged, out-group hostile political content relative to a chronological feed, even when users reported preferring something else. That distinction is not trivial. Behavioral engagement and stated satisfaction can diverge. Casinos know this. A customer may dislike losing and continue playing. A platform user may dislike a post and remain on the platform to argue with it. A television viewer may claim to despise a personality and watch every appearance. Observed attention is not the same as welfare. The machine sees the first and may know very little about the second. Now add misinformation. Killian McLaughlin and his co-authors examined more than 1 million Facebook links, tens of thousands of posts on Twitter, and controlled experiments involving nearly 1,500 participants. Misinformation sources generated more outrage than trustworthy sources. Outrage encouraged sharing. Participants were also more willing to share outrage-inducing misinformation without reading it first. The most disturbing part is the last one. The message can circulate before it has been cognitively consumed. In ordinary economics, we often assume the consumer evaluates the product and then chooses whether to purchase it. Online sharing can reverse the sequence. The user distributes first because the headline performs identity, emotion, or affiliation. Evaluation may never occur. Distribution becomes a substitute for consumption. I had dinner with Paul Samuelson in 1998 at the American Economic Association meetings. I've told this story before. He asked me a question about utility functions. I did not know the answer. Not a sophisticated answer. Any answer. I had a doctorate from Chicago. I had worked at Salomon. I was at the Federal Reserve. I had built an identity around being quantitatively competent, and this elderly economist exposed a hole in it with one calm question. I have thought about that exchange for almost 30 years. The lesson was not that Samuelson knew more than I did. Of course he did. The lesson was that real authority increases your exposure to humiliation. Serious intellectual environments repeatedly place you near people capable of revealing what you do not know. The attention authority regime often does the opposite. It allows the speaker to choose the arena, block critics, select favorable clips, mobilize an audience, and convert correction into evidence of persecution. Confidence can be produced without the institutional danger of being examined by a person who knows the subject. The new authority is therefore cheaper to issue. It is also faster. This helps explain why conspiracy claims have become efficient authority instruments. The claimant does not need to show knowledge of the Obama administration, Chicago political organizations, constitutional law, gender biology, media history, or Michelle Obama's documented life. He only needs to demonstrate access to a claim his coalition recognizes as forbidden. The forbidden quality becomes the credential. The speaker appears courageous because the statement violates a norm. Violation is then misread as evidence. The audience reasons that a person willing to incur criticism must possess hidden conviction, and hidden conviction is mistaken for hidden knowledge. Spence would recognize the structure but question the equilibrium. A costly signal works only when the cost separates types. If anyone can produce the signal cheaply, it stops identifying quality. Provocation once carried meaningful cost because access to national distribution was scarce. A television network could fire you. A newspaper could refuse publication. A political party could deny entry. Your local reputation could collapse. Today, the cost is segmented. Condemnation from one audience can increase status inside another. Exclusion from one platform can become the marketing campaign for entry onto another. A creator described as unacceptable by conventional advertisers, may become especially valuable to a platform seeking users who feel rejected by conventional culture. The sanction has become convertible. That does not mean consequences disappear. Careers still collapse. Sponsors still leave. Promoters still discipline talent. Defamation law still exists. Hawkett may discover that the comet cost more than it produced. We do not yet know the complete payoff. The point is narrower. The expected cost of provocation can be lower than the visible outrage suggests, because some portion of the outrage is itself revenue-producing distribution. Critics believe they are imposing a penalty. The attention ledger may record a gain. This is the correction paradox. The false claim forces responsible people to repeat it in order to deny it. Journalists place it in headlines. Fact-checkers reproduce it. Television hosts play the clip. Public officials respond. Each correction increases the number of people who encounter the original formulation. The defender pays the research cost. The target pays the humiliation cost. The platform receives the traffic. The claimant retains the identity of the person who was bold enough to say it. That allocation resembles an externality. The actor, creating the social cost, does not bear the full cost. Other participants are compelled to spend time, reputation, and cognitive energy repairing the informational environment. I want to concede the strongest objection to my argument. Institutional authority helped create the conditions for its own decline. Credentialed institutions supported catastrophic policy errors. Financial experts failed before the crisis. Intelligence institutions made claims that did not survive events. Universities sometimes treated political conformity as intellectual competence. News organizations compressed complicated stories while presenting themselves as neutral referees. Public health communication occasionally substituted command for explanation. People did not abandon a perfect system because a phone hypnotized them. Trust was spent. But the failure of one authority system does not automatically validate the metric that replaced it. A corrupt rating agency does not make a meme an adequate credit model. A mistaken professor does not make 10 million followers evidence of biological expertise. The new system solved a real access problem and created a severe verification problem. It gave outsiders publication. It also gave performance the visual appearance of knowledge. So, when Hawkett spoke, he entered a world in which the largest platform can locally outrank the strongest evidence. The speaker with the faster clip becomes the temporary authority because the audience encounters his confidence before it encounters the correction. The platform does not ask who has done the work. It asks who can hold the room. And holding the room has become a form of capital. The claim about Michelle Obama was not selected at random. That requires explanation because randomness is the comfortable interpretation. Under the comfortable interpretation, a fighter said something crude, the audience reacted, and the episode belongs in the large archive of public stupidity. That interpretation misses the targeting system. A conspiracy survives when it attaches itself to a pre-existing cultural seam. It does not need to create the seam. It needs to find a place where a society already has difficulty classifying a person. Michelle Obama occupied several such seams at once. She was raised on the south side of Chicago and attended public schools. She studied sociology and African American studies at Princeton. She earned a law degree from Harvard in 1988. She worked at Sidley and Austin in Chicago city government and in executive and community-facing roles connected to the University of Chicago. She became a mother, a campaign surrogate, and then the first black First Lady of the United States. The position of First Lady is itself an institutional oddity. It is nationally visible, but not created by the Constitution. It carries public expectations, but no independent electoral mandate. The office has historically required a woman to perform national femininity on behalf of a male presidency. She is expected to appear intelligent without competing with the president, stylish without appearing vain, maternal without appearing unserious, politically useful without appearing politically ambitious. The role is a classification machine. A First Lady is evaluated not only for what she does, but for whether her body, voice, marriage, clothing, motherhood, and emotional presentation conform to an inherited image of who may symbolize American womanhood. Michelle Obama entered that role carrying a biography the country had never previously placed inside it. The conspiracy claim attacked the seam between the biography and the inherited category. Amanda Sesko and Monica Biernat's work on the social perception of black women helps explain the deeper structure. Their research examined the way race and gender prototypes can make black women less cognitively representative of either the category black person, often implicitly coded male, or the category woman, often implicitly coded white. Other research summarized in that literature found that black women have historically been stereotyped as more assertive, independent, strong, and masculine, while being denied traits conventionally coded as feminine. That does not mean every observer consciously holds the stereotype. It means the culture contains a ready-made distortion function. When a tall, athletic, dark-skinned black woman displays authority, discipline, physical strength, or professional force, those ordinary human traits can be processed through a racialized gender template that codes her as insufficiently feminine. The conspiracy takes the template and literalizes it. It converts "she does not fit my prototype of femininity" into "she is secretly male." That is why the claim is both absurd and historically legible. Its factual content is empty. Its cultural ancestry is not. Communication scholars examining the 2008 campaign documented the racialized and gendered treatment Michelle Obama received. She was framed as angry, militant, unpatriotic, domineering, and dangerous. Her body, facial expressions, clothing, and relationship with her husband became objects of political interpretation. The famous fist bump between Barack and Michelle Obama was described in one television segment as a possible terrorist fist jab. That phrase now sounds almost too crude to have passed through a professional broadcast. It did. The episode shows how quickly an unfamiliar form of black intimacy could be reclassified as threat. The country had no difficulty seeing a married couple celebrate. Some institutions had difficulty allowing that image to remain ordinary. This is where the history of Barack Obama's rise becomes relevant. For many observers, the 2008 election has been reduced to a morality play. Some remember it as national redemption. Others remember it as elite manipulation. Both are compressed accounts. The actual political event was produced by interacting conditions. The George W. Bush administration entered its final years carrying the costs of the Iraq War, the political aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and collapsing public confidence. The housing system had been deteriorating beneath increasingly fragile mortgage finance. Lehman Brothers failed in September, credit markets seized, retirement accounts fell. The presidential campaign was forced to operate inside a financial emergency. John McCain carried his own strengths and weaknesses. His decision to suspend his campaign during the crisis was interpreted by some voters as leadership and by others as instability. Barack Obama's campaign constructed an unusually effective field organization, raised money through new digital channels, dominated among younger voters and black voters, and presented a disciplined contrast during economic panic. Race was present throughout, but race was not a single variable. Obama had spent years inside Chicago institutions that many national observers did not understand. His association with Jeremiah Wright and Trinity United Church of Christ became the largest religious campaign story of the cycle. His speech on race attempted to explain a black church tradition, a white family history, urban grievance, national memory, and political coalition without allowing any one piece to consume the candidacy. Whether one admired that speech or rejected it, understanding it required historical context. Understanding the election required context. Understanding the financial crisis required context. Understanding the policy inheritance required context. The conspiracy offers relief from context. Instead of asking how a black political family moved through Chicago, elite universities, law, community institutions, electoral organization, national media, and a historic financial collapse, the conspiracy says the visible result is fraudulent. No institutional history is required. No policy record is required. No knowledge of mortgage finance, campaign organization, racial history, or executive government is required. The public outcome can be canceled by recoding the people. Barack Obama was not really eligible. Michelle Obama is not really a woman. The pattern is structurally consistent. Political achievement is neutralized through category fraud. I call this status cancellation. When an outgroup achievement creates psychological or social strain, the observer has several options. He can revise his model of who is capable of occupying the role. He can accept the achievement while opposing the person's politics. He can examine the institutional conditions that produce the outcome. Or he can preserve the old hierarchy by declaring that the apparent exception was counterfeit. The final option has the lowest cognitive cost. Diana Mutz's work on the 2016 election argued that perceived status threat explained changes in voter behavior more effectively than personal economic hardship in her data. She emphasized declining demographic dominance, the rising status of minority groups, and anxiety about national position. That argument has been challenged. Stephen Morgan argued that the evidence did not justify pushing material interests aside so cleanly. He was right to challenge a simple substitution of status for economics. People can experience wage pressure, regional decline, cultural displacement, and racial threat at the same time. A factory closure is material. The humiliation attached to the closure can be status-based. Political interpretation binds them together. I do not use status threat as a universal explanation. I use it to explain why some false stories offer emotional relief. The Michelle Obama conspiracy does not provide new information about her. It protects a pre-existing classification system from contradictory evidence. The successful black woman is reclassified as male. The prestigious black family is reclassified as fraudulent. The electoral victory is reclassified as deception. The audience no longer has to revise the hierarchy. It only has to discover the secret. Nancy Rosenblum and Russell Muirhead describe a modern form of conspiracism that can operate without the elaborate evidence structures associated with older conspiracy literature. Traditional conspiracy accounts often attempted to assemble documents, timelines, hidden organizations, and causal chains. The new form can survive through repetition, gesture, and social validation. No theory is required. People are saying it. Look at this photograph. Ask questions. Why are they afraid to discuss it? The accusation does not conclude an investigation. The accusation replaces investigation. That form is perfectly adapted to clipped media because it carries almost no informational overhead. A complete historical argument is difficult to fit into a vertical video. Suspicion fits easily. In the autumn of 2008, I was at the Bank for International Settlements in Basel. I watched the American election from inside an institution trying to understand a global banking collapse. The hallway conversations were complicated. Dollar funding, European bank balance sheets, collateral, mortgage securities, counterparty exposure, central bank swap lines, capital impairment. Nobody serious believed one variable explained the crisis. Then I would turn on television and see the crisis compressed into a villain. Greedy bankers, irresponsible borrowers, government housing policy, deregulation. Each explanation contained something true. None was sufficient. I began to understand that the public does not merely receive simplified versions of expert accounts. Public communication often operates under a different objective function. It needs a character, a motive, and a conclusion that can survive interruption. Complex systems resist those requirements. The result is causal compression. We preserve the part that moves and discard the part that explains. The Michelle Obama claim is causal compression in an extreme form. It takes decades of social change and turns them into anatomy. The entire Obama era becomes the product of a concealed biological fact. That is why the claim feels satisfying to people who possess no evidence for it. It closes too many open files at once. It explains discomfort with Michelle Obama's appearance. It explains distrust of Barack Obama. It signals opposition to contemporary gender politics. It mocks liberal institutions. It offers membership in a group that believes it can see through official narratives. One sentence performs all of those tasks. The falsehood is therefore multifunctional, even though it is informationally empty. And the racial element cannot be treated as an accidental byproduct. Black women in American culture have repeatedly been denied access to protected femininity. They have been represented as physically excessive, emotionally aggressive, sexually deviant, invulnerable to pain, or suited for labor rather than delicacy. The man claim draws from that archive. Transgender panic gives the archive a modern vocabulary. Partisan media gives it distribution. The creator market gives it compensation potential. The octagon gives it masculine theater. The White House gives it national scale. Notice how the pieces lock together. I want to resist one easy conclusion. Not every person who repeats the claim has studied or consciously endorsed this history. Most have not. Cultural codes do not require historical literacy. A person can reproduce a structure he cannot name. That is part of their durability. The phrase can be experienced as a joke, a political insult, a conspiracy, an anti-transgender signal, a racial degradation, or an act of rebellion against elite etiquette. Different users purchase different exposures through the same sentence. Finance has instruments like this. A security can be held for income, hedging, speculation, regulatory treatment, or collateral value. The asset remains the same while the holder's purpose changes. The conspiracy is a multi-use political asset. Some holders believe it literally. Some treat it as humor. Some use it to provoke. Some use it to demonstrate loyalty. Some distribute it because condemnation gives them a temporary claim to moral visibility. The belief question matters, but it does not exhaust the function. That is the deeper historical answer. The sentence was able to emerge at the White House because the culture had spent years constructing the semantic infrastructure underneath it. Hawkett did not invent the weapon. He fired it from the most valuable stage available, and the target was chosen because her documented life represented exactly what the conspiracy needed to erase. The lie is not a mistaken biography. It is an instrument for restoring a hierarchy without naming the hierarchy. Let us build the economics from first principles. Assume a public figure can choose between two messages. The first is accurate, qualified, and difficult to compress. It produces moderate attention from a broad audience. It is unlikely to trigger severe sanctions. Its viewers may respect it, but few feel compelled to distribute it. The second is false or weakly supported, highly polarizing, directed at a famous out-group figure and short enough to stand alone. It produces a smaller probability of ordinary acceptance, but a much larger probability of explosive circulation. It may create sanctions, though those sanctions can increase loyalty within a narrower faction. The speaker compares expected private payoffs. The private payoff from a message equals the probability of circulation multiplied by the value of whatever circulation can be converted into, minus the costs that actually reach the speaker. Conversion can include followers, subscriptions, interview demand, ticket sales, political access, sponsorship from aligned brands, or a more distinct bargaining position with a promoter. Costs can include fines, lost sponsors, employer discipline, legal exposure, audience rejection, and long-term reputational damage. The phrase that actually reached the speaker is doing a great deal of work. Many costs created by misinformation do not reach the originator. The target must respond. Journalists must verify. Researchers must supply context. Employers must manage the controversy. Families absorb harassment. Platforms moderate the responses. The public spends time deciding what happened. The speaker may experience only a fraction of the total cost. Private payoff and social payoff separate. That is the classic structure of an externality. Now consider message design. A high-value provocation tends to possess 5 properties. It has low production cost. It has immediate recognizability. It produces strong disagreement. It attaches to an existing coalition boundary. It remains intelligible when detached from context. The last property is clip independence. A long argument often loses meaning when a 10-second segment is removed. A successful provocation becomes stronger when removed. Context would only introduce qualifications, uncertainty, or competing interpretations. The line about Michelle Obama was almost perfectly clip independent. No prior sentence was necessary. No later sentence was necessary. The audience did not need to know who won the fight. The image of the cage, the microphone, and the White House was sufficient. That creates what I call venue arbitrage. Suppose the same individual says the same words in 4 locations: a private living room, a local gym, a regional fight promotion, the White House South Lawn during a nationally distributed UFC event. The semantic content is unchanged. The attention value is radically different. The speaker exploits the spread between the low cost of producing the sentence and the high symbolic value of the location. In finance, arbitrage usually refers to price differences across markets. This is not a riskless arbitrage, and I do not want to abuse the term. The structure is closer to borrowing an expensive asset for a brief period and attaching one's private issuance to it. The White House functions as reputational collateral. The UFC functions as distribution infrastructure. Joe Rogan functions as a recognition amplifier. The fighter's recent victory functions as proof of physical credibility. The claim then enters circulation carrying all 4. This is where embodied authority enters. Humans regularly transfer competence across domains without justification. A successful entrepreneur is asked about public health. An actor is asked about foreign policy. An athlete is asked about constitutional law. A person who demonstrates mastery in one visible domain acquires a halo that audiences apply to invisible domains. Hawkett had just defeated a dangerous heavyweight. His body had survived a public test. The audience had witnessed courage, strength, and technical control. Seconds later, the microphone allowed that physical authority to spill into an unrelated factual claim. The fight did not establish knowledge about Michelle Obama. It changed the emotional pricing of the speaker. I call this embodied authority spillover. The mechanism is especially strong in combat sports because the achievement is undeniable and visually immediate. A fighter cannot fake the opponent lying on the canvas. The audience sees a real test and then becomes vulnerable to extending that reality into the post-fight persona. Professional wrestling has used this transfer for decades. The body authenticates the character. The character sells the next event. Mixed martial arts adds a further element. The competition is real, but the surrounding attention market still rewards narrative conflict. The athlete must be both competitor and media property. Now place this inside the betting economy. In March 2026, UFC named Bet365 its official sports betting partner in the United States and Canada. The partnership included on-screen odds, betting tickers, introductory odds, and same-game parlay features. That arrangement changes how the event is consumed. The bout is no longer only a contest with a final winner. It becomes a sequence of priced possibilities, method of victory, round, duration, combinations, live odds. The audience is invited to interpret each moment as a changing probability. This does not cause political provocation. It trains the commercial system to value volatility. A predictable event provides fewer repricing opportunities. A volatile event produces movement, conversation, hedging, reaction, and repeated attention. The same commercial taste appears in creator media. A stable creator produces a known level of interest. A volatile creator can generate sudden traffic spikes. He may be dangerous for ordinary advertisers, but highly effective for businesses that benefit from impulsive, high-arousal users. Kick and Stake provide the clean adjacent example. The same founders built a streaming platform and a gambling business. Kick offered unusually favorable creator economics and comparatively permissive content rules. The platform reported large direct payments to creators. Its share of watched streaming hours grew sharply. Again, the inference needs calibration. Kick is not merely an advertisement page for Stake. It has subscriptions, creator programs, its own user base, and ambitions beyond gambling streams. But common ownership allows the platform to serve as cultural acquisition infrastructure. It gathers young, high-engagement audiences around creators whose behavior might be unusable in conventional advertising channels. The streaming content normalizes volatility. The gambling product monetizes risk appetite. The systems do not have to be identical to reinforce one another. Consider the grocery store provocation model again. The creator enters a business and creates a small social emergency. He may open food, insult an employee, imitate a racial stereotype, obstruct a checkout line, or create the appearance that ordinary rules no longer apply. Why does this travel? The event contains uncertainty. The employee might laugh, yell, call security, or become frightened. The audience waits for resolution. Each second carries the possibility of escalation. This is a variable reward schedule. Behavioral psychology has known for decades that uncertain rewards can produce persistent attention. Slot machines use it, live sports use it naturally, provocation content manufactures it socially. The creator does not know the exact reaction. That uncertainty is part of the product. A calm educational stream can promise information. A confrontation stream promises variance. Platforms can price variance because variance prevents the viewer from knowing when it is safe to leave. During the dot-com period, I lost a substantial amount of my own money in a small number of technology stocks. I had the training to know better. I taught diversification. I understood valuation. I still convinced myself that my information was superior. One reason was market attention. The stocks were liquid. Everyone discussed them. Analysts produced targets. Colleagues had opinions. Price movement created the sensation that information was continuously arriving. I mistook informational velocity for informational quality. The market's attention made the assets feel researched even when the research was weak. Social media produces the same error at greater speed. A claim attracts response. The response attracts coverage. The coverage attracts fact-checking. The fact-checking attracts counterclaims. The growing volume then appears to justify the original attention. People ask, why is everyone discussing this if there's nothing there? Because everyone is discussing it. The effect is reflexive. A rumor can create the social conditions that make the rumor appear worthy of investigation. That does not make it factually true. It makes it socially material. This distinction is the difference between truth and performativity. Donald Mackenzie's work on finance showed that models can shape the markets they claim only to describe. Black Scholes was not merely a camera aimed at option prices. Its adoption helped organize trading behavior in ways that move prices toward the model. A conspiracy can perform a darker version of the same process. The claim does not alter Michelle Obama's biography. It alters the media environment around her biography. It forces institutions to answer a question that evidence never required them to ask. Once enough people answer, the question gains historical reality as a controversy. The statement manufactures its own relevance. Now return to the private payoff equation. The speaker's expected gain rises with circulation and conversion. The social cost rises with confusion, harassment, correction labor, and institutional degradation. If the speaker captures the gain while others absorb the cost, the market produces more provocation than a socially efficient system would choose. This is not a moral judgment grafted onto the economics. It is the same reason factories emit too much pollution when emissions are free. Banks take too much correlated risk when rescue is expected. And traders submit too many orders when cancellation imposes no cost. Unpriced externalities generate excess production. The attention market overproduces claims whose correction costs are externalized. One possible objection is that controversy can destroy commercial value. That is correct. Many brands avoid polarizing figures. White's response shows the UFC itself recognized a boundary. Large distribution platforms can suspend accounts. Public opposition can make a figure permanently unattractive to mainstream partners. The trade is not free. It is uncertain. That uncertainty reinforces the option structure. Most provocations disappear. A few become identity-defining events. The creator does not need every attempt to work if one viral event creates a durable audience. The same logic explains why increasingly extreme behavior can emerge. Once the audience adapts to one level of provocation, the next performance must exceed it to produce the same arousal. The creator faces tolerance. Financial markets have an analog in reaching for yield. When safe returns fall, investors move into riskier assets to preserve the target return. When ordinary content produces less attention, creators move into more invasive, humiliating, or politically explosive behavior to preserve the target view count. The required risk rises because the required return has not changed. That is the surface mechanism. A public figure issues a low-cost provocation. The venue and existing fame increase its circulation probability. Platforms and media organizations distribute it because reaction is measurable. Supporters and critics perform unpaid marketing. The originator captures some share of the resulting attention. Other participants absorb much of the verification and reputational cost. The sentence, therefore, has positive private expected value even when it has negative informational value. But this still does not reach the deepest layer. We have explained why the sentence travels. We have not yet explained why the sentence feels like knowledge to the people who repeat it. For that, we need to examine the hidden wiring of compression itself. Claude Shannon's information theory begins from a severe abstraction. A sender has a message. A channel has limited capacity. The message must be encoded, transmitted, and reconstructed. When channel capacity is low, compression becomes necessary. Lossless compression preserves the original information exactly. Lossy compression discards information in exchange for a lower transmission rate. The central question in lossy compression is not whether information will be lost. Information will be lost. The question is, which losses count as distortion? That is where politics enters. A photograph can be compressed while preserving the features human vision notices and discarding features it does not. An audio file can remove frequencies many listeners cannot perceive. The compression system contains an implicit model of what the receiver values. Public narratives also compress. No human can carry the complete causal history of a presidency, a financial crisis, a marriage, a city, a racial order, or a person's life. We reduce. We select variables. We create characters. We assign motives. We discard detail. The dangerous part is the distortion function. A truth-oriented compression system attempts to preserve causal structure while reducing detail. An identity-oriented compression system attempts to preserve coalition meaning while allowing factual structure to collapse. That is the mechanism behind the Michelle Obama claim. The full source contains a woman born in Chicago, educated in public schools, Princeton and Harvard Law, employed across law, government, nonprofit work, and university administration, married, raising children, serving as First Lady, and living under unusual public scrutiny. The compressed output contains 5 words. The compression ratio is enormous. The factual distortion is total. The coalition information is preserved almost perfectly. The audience immediately knows who is being attacked, which institutions are being rejected, which gender conflict is being activated, which political era is being mocked, and which group is expected to laugh. The claim is therefore poor biography and excellent coalition code. I call this identity-preserving compression. It explains why the sentence can remain useful after being disproved. A factual correction evaluates whether the compressed output accurately represents the source. The audience may be using a different distortion measure. It asks whether the output preserves affiliation. Does the sentence tell my group that I reject the Obamas? Does it reject elite media? Does it mock contemporary gender norms? Does it show that I am willing to violate liberal etiquette? If those signals survive, the claim has performed its function. Truth becomes optional because truth was not the feature being compressed. This is why treating every conspiracy believer as a failed scientist produces limited results. Some believers are making factual claims and can respond to evidence. Others are participating in a social ritual whose factual surface conceals an affiliative function. You cannot correct a loyalty signal by supplying a better footnote. The phrase, "Am I right, America?" reveals the structure. That was not a request for medical evidence. It was a call and response census. The speaker placed a proposition into the room and asked the crowd to sort itself publicly. Agreement established membership. Laughter reduced social risk. Silence became ambiguous. Outrage from outsiders confirmed that the boundary had been located. The sentence did not merely describe a belief. It selected an audience. Hockett had spent much of his life being selected by institutions. Walk-on evaluations, wrestling brackets, football depth charts, professional roster decisions, contender series judgment, promotional rankings. The White House moment reversed the direction of selection. For several seconds, he became the selector. "Am I right, America?" asked which America was present. This is a deeper function of provocation. It transforms a heterogeneous audience into observable factions. Before the statement, the crowd shares a sporting event. After the statement, every reaction becomes political data. Promoters learn who cheers. Platforms learn who comments. Creators learn which clip converts. Politicians learn which language activates. The audience believes it is expressing itself. The system is measuring it. That is why I describe the statement as a coalition checksum. In computing, a checksum is a compact value used to verify whether information matches an expected state. The conspiracy phrase is a compact test of political compatibility. A long policy questionnaire would be more informative. The phrase is faster. It tests sentiment through reaction rather than deliberation. Now consider the venue again. The White House is supposed to function as a settlement layer for national authority. Elections, ceremonies, legislation, diplomacy, mourning, military command, and executive decisions acquire final public form there. The building does not make every action legitimate, but it signals that the action has entered the official record of the state. Placing a commercial fight on the South Lawn already merged several authority systems: government authority, athletic authority, broadcast authority, celebrity authority, commercial sponsorship. The post-fight conspiracy then used the merge system as a launch mechanism. This is symbolic capital stripping. The private actor does not need to own the institution. He needs temporary access to its image. The clip extracts the building's recognition value and attaches that value to a personal brand. Every repost repeats the White House. Every headline repeats the White House. Every condemnation asks how this could occur at the White House. The venue remains inside the content after the physical event is over. That produces an institutional asymmetry. The White House cannot easily recover the symbolic value once the clip circulates. It can issue statements, set future rules, or condemn the speaker. The extracted image has already become private inventory across thousands of accounts. Public prestige is therefore used as a production input. Private attention is the output. The reputational waste remains public. This resembles resource extraction more than ordinary speech. There is a second hidden transfer. The speaker emits a short claim. The target and the public inherit a long obligation. To answer responsibly, one must establish the claim's origin, explain its falsity, discuss manipulated images or edited audio, reconstruct Michelle Obama's documented biography, identify racialized gender stereotypes, and avoid repeating the falsehood so aggressively that the correction becomes new distribution. The falsehood requires seconds. The correction requires paragraphs. The imbalance is sometimes called the asymmetry of refutation. I prefer epistemic debt transfer. The originator borrows attention by issuing an unsupported claim. The debt is assigned to everyone else. Fact-checkers service it, journalists refinance it, targets live under it, platforms collect fees in the form of engagement. The issuer may never repay principal. Finance is filled with structures that hide risk by moving it away from the point of origination. Before the financial crisis, mortgage originators could sell loans into securitization chains. The originator earned fees, while later investors absorbed default exposure. The separation between origination and ownership weakened underwriting incentives. The attention market has its own originate-to-distribute model. The provocateur originates the claim. Accounts package it, algorithms rank it, news organizations distribute it to broader audiences. Commentators create derivative content. The social loss is held by people who never consented to the original issuance. Once you see that chain, the moral vocabulary of bad manners looks inadequate. The problem is an incentive-compatible production system. My father was a structural engineer. He worked on bridges and highways around Pittsburgh. Late in his life, he asked whether my work involved actually buying and selling anything, or whether finance professors merely talked about people who did. I laughed at the time. I think about the question differently now. At the White House event, nearly everyone was buying or selling something. The fighter sold shock. The audience sold reaction. The broadcaster sold access. The sportsbook sold priced uncertainty. The platform sold retention. The political actors sold affiliation. The institution rented prestige, whether it understood the transaction that way or not. Michelle Obama was the involuntary underlying asset. My father would have asked where the load sat. That is the structural engineering question. When a bridge fails, the visible crack is rarely the complete explanation. You examine the load path. Which member carried force? Where was redundancy missing? Which joint transferred stress into a part never designed to hold it? The visible crack here was one fighter's statement. The load path runs through platform ranking, promoter incentives, sports betting integration, creator compensation, political polarization, racialized gender classification, clip-based media, and public institutions willing to function as entertainment backdrops. Remove the fighter, and the load remains. Another figure can occupy the same position because the system continues to reward the behavior class. This is why explanations centered entirely on individual ignorance are incomplete. Intelligence matters, education matters, prejudice matters, personal agency matters. Hawkett chose the words. Yet a structural explanation asks a different question. Why was a microphone, audience, venue, and distribution network assembled in a configuration where those words possessed such an extreme payoff? That is the binding constraint question. The scarce resource was not opinion. America has an unlimited supply of opinion. The scarce resource was an authenticated national stage. Once access to that stage was granted, the highest return use of the moment may not have been gratitude, technical fight analysis, or even conventional self-promotion. The highest variance use was a statement capable of escaping the sports audience entirely. He converted a fight interview into national political inventory. From the standpoint of attention, that is an efficient conversion. From the standpoint of knowledge, it is catastrophic. Donald Mackenzie's concept of performativity gives us the final piece. A model can help create the reality it describes. The conspiracy claim performs a social reality even when it fails to describe biological reality. After the statement, there is now a controversy. There are official responses. There are fact checks. There are television segments. There are millions of people who first encountered the claim because it was denied. There are supporters who interpret condemnation as proof of courage. There are critics who see the event as proof of institutional decay. The sentence has created real political objects out of false factual material. That is performative misinformation. Its success should not be measured only by belief. Measure the institutions forced to react. Measure the hours consumed. Measure the identities strengthened. Measure the new audience relationships. Measure the shift in what can be said at the next event. A false claim can lose the factual contest and win the institutional contest. I told you at the beginning that the statement operated like an option. I want to complicate that now. The option metaphor captures the asymmetric payoff to the speaker, but it underestimates the collective machinery. An option has a defined counterparty and a contract. This object had no single counterparty. The entire public became the counterparty. That is more dangerous because nobody can close the position. So let me answer the opening question cleanly. What kind of market makes 5 false words more valuable than an entire verified human life? A market that prices transmissibility instead of accuracy, allows the speaker to privatize reach while socializing the cost of verification, and mistakes coalition recognition for knowledge. That is the answer. The 5 words did not defeat Michelle Obama's biography. They bypassed it. Biography is slow. The coalition checksum is instant. Biography asks the audience to tolerate complexity. The checksum asks the audience to reveal allegiance. Biography requires institutions capable of preserving records. The checksum requires only a microphone and a reaction. For most of the 20th century, elite institutions controlled the microphone and therefore controlled much of the compression. That system hid information, excluded voices, and often protected itself. The open platform weakened that control, but the microphone did not become neutral. It acquired a new owner, the ranking system, the commercial model, the audience's nervous system. The next stage of political power may depend less on persuading citizens that a claim is true and more on discovering which false claim they will distribute while attempting to prove that they are not persuaded. That is the part I cannot close neatly. The most valuable propagandist may no longer be the person who makes you believe. It may be the person who makes disbelief indistinguishable from distribution. And the next lie may not ask for your confidence. It may ask only whether you are willing to carry it.